Hello, I'm Ben, DivKid, and in this video we're going to visit BugBrand. While I was down in Bristol some time ago for Machine of Bistronica, I got to see Tom again. Now you may remember several years ago I went to see Tom and there's a video that I'll link down below, but in this video I'm at BugBrand HQ talking about his colourful, literally colourful and sonically colourful modular synth system. There's a bit of a history lesson in some FRAC and Pyre that was around the time this was developing. We take a look at the then new phaser, it's been out for a while now, and we talk about how BugBrand operates a bit differently in developing modules and gear and kind of how things come to life over time. I really enjoyed the chat, I really like the BugBrand format, hope you enjoy it too. So let's dive in. With Tom, BugBrand, how's it going?
Hello, Ben.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you back. It's a few years.
Yeah. 4 years since I was last down.
Yeah, I'm definitely niche, I'd say. Found my sort of slightly different way of doing things, and that's got its strengths and weaknesses, given the sort of the way the market is, let's say. So I've been doing audio electronics for I think 18 years or so now, and modular wise I think I started that around 2009, investigating those sort of bits. And when I started off I had basically bugger all clue what I was doing, but one of the things that you need is a case to put stuff in. Now back then there wasn't much in the way of Eurorack, and certainly cases weren't all that available. I did actually try out a few of them, like sort of Euroframe cut things, and it just, I don't know, the sort of spacing I found a little bit difficult. I'd also at the same time found through Pyre, who are an old, I think they're maybe still doing kits in America, you could get a sort of really quite sort of wobbly frame case. Blaset also did them, and they were the main sort of FRAC maker. And I liked the sort of, basically it's mainly based in inches, in imperial, 1.5 inch spacing, 3U, so similar to Eurorack, but slightly different. Eurorack, I think, has a little lip, and they have slightly different spacing holes and that sort of stuff. So I'm inch based, but then I use metric screws bolts.
Yeah.
Because. So I'm a bit confused, you could say.
So 3U, as you say, like Eurorack, but all banana connections other than specific I/O that might be on 1/4 inch or something instead.
Yeah, I mean FRAC and Blaset, are they still doing? I know John Blaset passed away. He was pretty much the only person doing the FRAC rack stuff, and that was all 3.5mm mini jack. I never really gelled with mini jacks, let's say. Back when I started, you couldn't get stack cables, whatever they're called. And for the flow, really, for me, once I tried bananas, partly they were cheap and colourful, I liked the fact that you didn't have to have multiples, and so these sort of things informed my sort of choices.
They're a lovely thing to patch with as well. They're kind of simultaneously quite tight, snug fit, but it's sort of a looseness to them as well because of the way that the banana jacks bloom.
Yeah, they're also reliable.
Yeah. You're not patching through a ground plane like you are on a mini jack.
So, I mean, physically, like the whole area is contact. There's no, like the size of, like comparing it with mini jacks, the tiny sort of bit. And I actually, probably partly comes back to the first experience with Eurorack when I was studying, and there was a Dopefer system, I think a sort of one about these sort of sizes, and partly I probably didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I think that a lot of the connections were a bit dodgy, and it was like I don't know, it didn't flow really. It took me a long time working out how exactly I wanted to do things. And I mean, my old sort of shonky workshop space down the road was, how to make things. Things have, I've got to a sort of mature stage now, which involved basically making the whole infrastructure. FRAC originally, and this is how things have sort of evolved. Surface mount was still, I mean, it was completely new to me. A lot of people were still building in through hole. The exact sort of parts you use, like the potentiometers, initial where I could get potentiometers, it meant that the pots, the sort of physical bits that you turn, it meant that the circuit board would be perpendicular to the panel, and therefore if it's big it goes back, and therefore the original FRAC racks were like 6.5 inches deep, which was not very portable really. I tried to shrink things a bit. My first ones were like 4 inches deep, and then George Hearn, who I've now completely forgotten what his synth company is called.
He's with Udio.
Yeah.
Been at Model. Did he develop a VCO chip as well?
So I've known him for ages through sort of, but he's like got engineering skills really, and he was like, you should. I mean, he's given me all sorts of advice, but like, it was through him pushing that I finally tried out Surface Mount, because that's like, all those things are tiny, and actually it did revolutionise things for me, and that allowed me that, and also eventually sourcing kind of custom made pots that were a sort that I couldn't find in any sort of regular retailer. Allowed me then to start building parallel circuit boards like that, and I've just sort of fine-tuned from that point on. I've changed the banana jacks slightly, and that's allowed me then to shrink the sort of case size. So when I said, I'll always ramble about this sort of stuff, but having made the whole sort of infrastructure really, because as I say, there were only a couple of American-based sources for FRAC racks, and they were also slightly not in my sort of comfort zone of design really. So I somehow managed to learn enough CAD to start getting aluminium cases made to my specifications, and shrunk it down to 2.3 inches deep, which gives enough space for 2 circuit boards with my sort of spacing, and a distribution power board in there. I've absolutely stuck with bananas. Apart from input and output maybe to the real world, you can do it with interface. And for the red designs, which are, they're modules, and they're within the same cases, and they can go into the bigger cases, but they have 1/4 inch input and output, so they can fit in more easily to a regular studio world.
So I've always seen the modular system, both in users and yourself, as a kind of 6U 2-row. That is your kind of the BugBrand modular system, as it were. Of course, you can build more of it, but
and sort of smaller. I mean, I started off with the synth voice that was a 1 frame size, and then have gradually sort of built up from there. I actually really like the 2 frame approach because it's compact. It's, I don't know, I think an instrument kind of needs limitations, and you don't. I don't know. It's quite good to have a sort of, this is the size, and we've chosen these modules with a bit of consideration based on what designs I have, and actually a sort of system like this will just like, there's a load of possibilities.
Yeah, it's kind of endlessly creative, and the amount of
but it's still quite portable as well. I mean, I can't do it one-handed, but like yeah,
it fits in a bag, easy to play with. It is just that kind of magic size of, as you say, being flexible and kind of endlessly kind of creative if you want to explore, but not so small it's restrictive.
Yeah. I mean, one of the sort of things I did over the last couple of years was change. I had a red design called Chirper, which was basically two cross-modulated, basically built around a single 2164 quad VCA chip, geekery. Two basic oscillators and a state variable filter. I've made that into a blue format, actually with an expander. So I can do a sort of like self-contained thing like that, a 5-space one. It makes really, you get a lot. It makes sort of more sense to. I both have done a single row where it has a little bit more sort of stuff around it, but really, and I've done a few for a shop in Japan now, a few where you've got a chirper up here, the sort of VCAs and the sort of audio sort of bit up here, and then a bit of the sort of event generation and stuff like that, clock dividers, the DDSR, which has been is just a sort of has been a really key design for me. And
well, it puts the way of playing the instrument, joysticks, touch interfaces, sequencing, quantizing in with the sound generation. It stops that separation of kind of, here's a synth voice and here is a keyboard or sequencer or MIDI unit or whatever that might be.
I mean, you can put actually I'm wanting to get like another Arturia sort of controller thing, because they're quite direct and you can easily interface them use interface cables, banana to mini jack ones, and control in that sort of way. But I mean, the stuff where the designs have always come from for me, the sort of clock division and event generation has always been really quite key. So I'm keen. Sometimes people interface things with, I've got a big existing Eurorack system, I want to sort of cross patch. But actually, I mean, maybe do little bits of that, but also think of this as a self-contained system with maybe a sort of master clock that passes to the other system.
Well, it's really liberating to, let's say, mixing outputs of clock dividers or a gate sequencer and then quantizing all those things, or a shift register as you have, to kind of let go of some of the pattern generation a little bit. I think if people have come to this from another instrument and they have, say, a melodic line in their head, under their fingertips on, say, a piano or a guitar, they would know how to get that out, whereas that's not as directly translatable to any modular format I've tried. But I find that really liberated, to either try and do those things or to just kind of just bend into that creativity and those limitations. And I find that's really what's almost more than the sound generation sometimes for me. That's what gets really exciting. When it's not me at a kind of piano or a piano roll on a screen having to kind of dot by dot make a melody or...
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the real joy, has always been one of the real joys of modular for me, is that, I mean, with these sort of things, you can kind of know where you're going, but the very physicality and it being the interface of it, that you're kind of constantly reacting to it, and kind of generating and creating in that way is very different from saying, I have this idea and I'm going to realize it in straight sort of terms. And so it's perhaps more conversational.
So we were listening to the Phaser, the latest red box, and talking about where that's come from and prototyping and kind of getting to an end product, really. I mean, what was the impetus to make a Phaser to start with, I guess? Is it something you've always used as a musician, or a kind of technical curiosity about phasing circuits, or...?
It's a mix of those. I think, in part, possibly, I got one of the old Eventide instant phase...
Okay, the rack unit.
Rack unit. Yeah. And it was very inflexible, really. And yeah, I guess I've always, in looking at sort of data sheets and synth sort of, all that sort of circuitry sort of stuff, being like all pass filters, curiosity about that, and like wanting to sort of build something, and certainly comparing it with the Eventide, like how I can't remember whether you could really modulate that very. I don't know whether you could interface like your own sort of, well, I don't know, your own sort of interesting modulation sort of thing. So I was like, no, that's certainly, it's something I've got to gradually try out, really. And again, using this 2164 chip, I mean, over the years, what different sort of ways of doing phasers have there been? Basically, it's a sort of filter stage, and then how do you make that, how do you control that? There have been ones that are like light controlled or Vactrol controlled,
kind of opto phasing thing.
And or VCA controlled. And I mean, I've just really liked the 2164 chip. It's clean and powerful, and it's the building block for a lot of, has been for my sort of designs. So I mean, like, when you came round, I was like, oh yeah, how long do these sort of things take? How do you go from sort of initial ideas, both testing out a circuit and also testing out the sort of physical layout, because it's often a sort of push and pull, really. And I mean, under here, this is more my sort of prototyping bench, which most of the time, I don't know, like, piles of sort of stuff, and I've dug out the sort of box where I have some older prototypes, and it turns out I'd done a single space one with some like all sorts of bits sticking off it. There was I can't remember whether this would have come first, like trying to do a dual one. I think thinking that basically, because you have several sort of stages within them,
you can split them off somehow.
And it was like, if I have two of them, then they can be used either independently or you can chain them one after another.
Yeah, so making an 8-stage phaser out of 2 4s or that kind of thing in series.
And I think I was still sort of playing around with the sort of exact topography of the phasing stages. And I think once I'd sort of tried things out a little bit and heard it, it was just like, the sort of real richness, the potential for richness came. You would need, the more stages you had, the richer it sort of sounded. And we all want, we all want richness, don't we?
Yeah.
But I think compared with old vintage sort of ones, I mean, if you're talking about guitar effects, often the sort of input impedances and stuff like that, they're not always going to be low noise for synth sort of stuff. But also, if they're using 13700 OTAs as the sort of VCA stages, those can be a bit noisy. And the 2164, in theory, can be cleaner. And what that allowed... I went back to a sort of 2-space design. First of all, before getting onto the red, I did a modular design, which rather than having the dual approach, it's just like, I'm going to have one and actually keep it relatively simple, have modulation options, and it uses 3 of the 2164s, so that's 12 stages. That makes a 6-pole phaser. So that's like, you can the phasing sort of board, and then there's the sort of support circuitry there. And I don't know, the sort of prototyping, I guess, spread over, who knows, a couple of years, something like that. It's easy to have ideas, but to actually like push them forwards takes a while.
Yeah.
And then choosing that, like zoning in on the particular sort of options, really.
And the ranges of controls as well. Like there's an LFO on the red one, the red phaser. Like how much do you... Of course you think about these things, I don't mean to suggest you don't, but how much thought goes into, do I make this LFO go right up through audio rates? How slow should it go? What?
Yeah.
Of course, you think, well, give me everything from sub to supersonic, but then the range of that pot would be so hard to dial in if it just went totally wild.
It's in the red one, it's a pretty basic one, and that part of that came from what sort of parts I had or how complex I wanted it to be circuit-wise.
Yeah.
And I'd sort of wondered, do I do something like a voltage-controlled LFO? Because, again, using the 2164s, could I sort of have it so that half of a 2164 chip is used for LFO or something like that? But I kind of wanted to keep them circuit-wise separate, for audio isolation, that sort of thing. Yeah. And actually, like, so how many options do you have? One of the interesting sort of things was the polarity of the signals, both in terms of mixing the dry and the wet signal together, and whether you inverted the phase of the wet, but then also the feedback path, and actually where you sort of tap the feedback path can sort of change things a little bit. And what I found actually was that a previous one, I don't know, it's maybe lost somewhere else. I had separate switches for the feedback polarity and for the dry and wet one, and then actually realised it's best if one's this way and one's that way, or they're basically switched in opposite, and therefore slimmed it down to a single control. And I've called that polarity add subtract. It's maybe slightly more involved than that, and I've carried that onto the red one as well. I've put in all my, like, kind of like a feedback loop. Is that effects loop?
Yeah,
I guess
send
what
and
you
return,
call.
effects loop, feedback path.
Don't know whether people have actually particularly used that, but it kind of made similar to on the PT delay red design. I'd sort of had that in there, and just like it kind of makes sense to have that as an option. But
yeah, it's nice to grunge up that PT delay line.
I think I've always been waiting for when I finally pull my finger out and make a frequency shifter, because then like a frequency shifter in the feedback would be amazing. But I shouldn't open that sort of gate of people being like, where's the frequency shifter going to come? But yeah.
People need to join your mailing list if they want to know when stock is coming. You build these in batches.
Yeah, the way that sort of works for me has been to order generally the designs in whatever sort of thing. I order multiples of 50 or 100, and then build them up in batches of say 10 or something like that, and release as I go along. It's a bit different from the modular. People have built it like how to get enough sort of bits to put together to make a full modular. But yeah, the phase has been out for months. Is that only a month? Yeah, something like that. And I've done one full batch and one small batch. We're making some more there at the moment. So I just sort of keep on keeping on at whatever pace. And yeah, mailing list. I mean, I do sort of bits of social media, lots of other sort of random waffle about stuff that both enthuses me and frustrates me in the world. There's lots of both. I have just today put out a very brief sort of mail out about, because I've done a few more crossover filters, which is a dual resonance filter. Also saying, yep, the PT delay red box like this. I have ordered more of them. The parts have been going to China for production. For some reason, they've been really slow doing that. Things come when they come. I mean, in some ways, talking about the prototyping sort of highlights how like it's quite slow to get to a point of production. In theory, it should be more sort of once you've finalised a design, it should then be relatively easy to replicate stuff and keep it. I've been trying to keep things in stock, but we didn't say, but I took 7 months off last year for various reasons, doing building work here on the building, having a bit of space and time after 15 plus years of doing this, bit of a perspective. And given sort of rebalancing other areas of life, and I've been doing a really fascinating, interesting, energizing course 1 day a week this year. So my production and having a new sort of assistant, just like a little, not as much as I've been used to having. Production it's just been carrying on at its own sort of pace, really. I'm never going to be a sort of like masses of stock going out everywhere. That just is how it is.
I think people want people to be happy. As frustrating as it can be for people, not just BugBrand, but anything that they want that is a bespoke item like this, or
small scale
item like that. Yeah, exactly. We want things now, and that's the culture we're in, but we want people such as yourself to be happy and to want to do this and for new ideas to come out and flourish, and that takes time. And I know I'd rather the person be happy doing it than frustrated and then stopping.
It's essential that everyone in whatever sort of walk, that we build in, I don't know, joy and happiness and well-being really in all of this, and actually balancing stuff and doing and whatever. And I still do get a load of pride and interest out of doing my own sort of niche thing. And I love the approach of small businesses, really, in whatever sort of thing, in so many sort of areas. So, yeah, I think it's...
And I think these things are worth the wait.
Hopefully, yeah.
But join the mailing list for anyone that is watching. Thinking,
and email me as well. I mean, I'm always sort of upfront about when things are coming, where the delays are, all that sort of stuff. I keep on churning things over. And like, as I say, with the modular sort of stuff, it can be a little bit more sort of, we can start off with, it's a much more email-y sort of thing. What sort of things are you going after? And we can build up.
Helping put systems together.
I mean, I've got some sort of example systems listed on the website, but it can then actually sort of change dependent on a couple of designs. Like actually the blue, it's that one. Yeah, the blue phaser. It's really confusing. Phase. That's the worst choices ever. That I used up. I ran out of all of the initial run of 50 boards and haven't had the sort of impetus to reorder it. I will at some point, but so when people, like one of the example systems has that down here as a processing sort of bit, and it's like, well, that's not in stock, but like I've just had a new dual sample and hold and noise thing come in. So it's like the sort of, as I was saying earlier, the 2-frame is a nice sort of size, really, and generally the sort of there'll be consistency. Probably some people have some interesting sort of different designs, but there'll probably be a consistency to the sort of module choices, with then slight variation depending on user and what I've got available at any time. So yeah.
Great. Well, it's been great to see you. I hope it's not 4 years since for next time.
Till the next time. No, it's lovely to see you as well. It's a shame, because it's for the machine of Brystronica, and it just happened. It wasn't. I didn't think about that I was going to be wearing this T-shirt again.